One Piece has a lot of arcs. Some of them are good while some of them are not. So I decided why not rank them. But before we begin, I just want to let you know that this is a compilation of some of my YouTube shorts. So if it occasionally doesn't make sense, you know why. So without further ado, let's begin. Ranking every single arc in One Piece, starting off with Romance Dawn. It's a fairly average introduction to a pretty amazing series, so it lands in C tier. Unfortunately, I feel the same way about Orange Town. It's basically just Luffy versus a clown that feels like a knockoff Pennywise, another C tier. But things pick up with the Syrup Village arc though. We get a decent fight from Luffy, and the introduction of Usopp, which gives it enough for a low B tier spot. But Baratier really raises the bar as there are a lot of great fights for Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, which make it a solid A tier. Then comes Arlong Park, which is way better. Luffy's battle is far more intense, and the rest of the crew also have memorable moments. This one easily goes on S tier. Finally, our last arc for today, Loketown. Loketown felt pretty forgettable, there wasn't much exciting action, so it belongs in C tier. Do you agree with my ranking? Starting off with Reverse Mountain. Even though I like Laboon, this arc felt very boring. Therefore, it goes in C tier. The next arc, Whiskey Peak, isn't much better. It made no sense that Luffy would attack Zoro. Therefore, it goes in C tier as well. But the next arc, Little Garden, is way better as the giants are so cool in this arc. As well, the world building was top tier. It definitely deserves an A tier. The next arc, Drum Island, on the other hand, does not, as the villain was very mediocre, so it belongs in C tier. And finally, let's talk about the Alabast arc, which obviously deserves an S tier, as the action for every character was top tier. Off with Jaya, which sets up Skypiea really well. Even if it doesn't have much action, it still deserves a B tier. Skypiea, on the other hand, was a massive letdown as the pacing was horrible and the action was very mediocre. So, it belongs in C tier. The next arc, Long Ring Long Land, which is the most hated arc in One Piece, I actually enjoyed as it was pretty funny. I think it belongs in B tier. On the other hand, an arc that I personally didn't enjoy, the Water 7 arc, as the action was very mid, so it belongs in C tier. Finally, an arc I enjoyed was Enies Lobby, as every member of the crew was very important and had great action, definitely an S tier. Off with Thriller Bark, which is a really funny arc with a lot of great action, definitely an S tier. And the next arc, Saboti Archipelago, is very similar as the animation and characters were top tier, another S tier. Amazon Lily, on the other hand, had no good action and wasn't very exciting. It goes in B tier. Now, let's talk about Impel Down, which is one of my favorite pre-time skip arcs, as it was very interesting and had a lot of great characters. Therefore, it goes in S tier. And finally, let's talk about Marineford, which was very awesome, but the pacing was kind of bad, therefore it goes in A tier. Return to Saboti, which is basically just Luffy or farming, and for a short arc, I think it is very enjoyable and deserves an A tier. Fishman Island, on the other hand, doesn't, as the villain was very forgettable and the pacing of this arc was very bad, especially with the flashbacks. I have ranked a lot of One Piece arcs, but this is the arc I dislike the most. It goes in D tier. Punk Hazard, on the other hand, is better as a lot of side characters were very important in this arc. That being said, it didn't really do anything groundbreaking, so it's a solid B tier. Let's talk about Dressrosa, which was a very good arc, and could be the best arc in One Piece if the pacing was a bit better. That being said, this arc had a lot of really great action for every single character such as Zoro, Law, and of course Luffy with Gear 4. Definitely an S tier. Do you agree with my ranking? Starting off with Zoo, which had great world building and set up the next arc really well, but in general this arc doesn't do much, B tier. And now, let's talk about Whole Cake Island, which is easily the arc I enjoyed the most. Everything from Luffy Gear 4 Snake Man to Sanji's backstory was incredibly well written. Also, the battle with Katakuri was so intense, easily S tier. Levia arc, on the other hand, I didn't enjoy too much, even as it was very important to the story of One Piece. If I'm ranking individual arcs, this one is pretty mid, C tier. And now, let's talk about Wano, which had arguably the most hype moment in anime history. That being said, this moment didn't save this arc with 197 episodes. Wano goes in D tier. And finally, to conclude the series, let's talk about Egghead Island, which had a lot of great fights such as Luffy vs Kizaru, Luffy vs Lucci, and Straw Hats vs the Goro Sea. But the action isn't carrying this arc, as this arc had some of the saddest backstories in One Piece. Easily S tier. Right.